In most countries, the map tells you where to go. In Mongolia, the map barely helps at all. And without understanding how that's possible, you'll miss the story of how people navigate a land larger than Western Europe with almost no paved roads, and why this freedom is the key to survival here. We'll begin with surprising truths about how Mongolia really works. Then we'll cross deserts, rivers, and mountain passes to find its most extraordinary places. One of them is so remote, it makes off the grid feel crowded. It's hard to wrap your head around just how big Mongolia really is. We're talking about a country that stretches over 1.5 million square kilometers. That's nearly 620,000 square miles. Bigger than France, Germany, Italy, and the UK combined. And yet, the entire population is just over 3 million people. That's fewer people than live in Brooklyn. But here's the crazy part. Half of Mongolia's population lives in just one city, the capital, Ulaanbaatar. That means the rest of the country, thousands upon thousands of kilometers, is mostly untouched, empty. You can drive for days and see nothing but grasslands, mountains, and sky. And in a country this open, roads are more of a suggestion than a guarantee. In fact, Mongolia is one of the only countries in the world where many travelers still navigate by compass. GPS helps, but out there in the steppe, you're often just following tire tracks in the dirt, with no signs, no gas stations, and no fences. It's part of the reason why Mongolia is known as the land without barriers. And this idea of freedom, of movement, runs deep in the Mongolian spirit. It's not just tradition, it's identity. Even today, 30% of the population lives a nomadic lifestyle. Not rural, not remote, truly nomadic. They pack up their homes, the iconic round jurs, and move with their animals, sometimes several times a year, chasing fresh pastures and seasonal balance. Imagine growing up with no street name, no backyard, just endless space, and the knowledge that the horizon is yours to follow. But don't mistake that for simplicity, because this land, often portrayed as empty, holds one of the richest legacies in human history. Over 800 years ago, Mongolia gave rise to the largest contiguous land empire the world has ever seen. At its peak, the Mongol Empire stretched from the Pacific Ocean to the edges of Europe, a landmass so vast that it would take modern airplanes over 10 hours to cross. And at the center of it all was a man born in a felt tent near the Yannan River. You might know him as Genghis Khan, though in Mongolia, he's called Chinggis Khan, and he's more than just a historical figure. He's a symbol of unity, of strength, of identity. Here's a fact that'll mess with your brain. Recent genetic studies suggest that nearly 0.5% of the world's male population, that's over 16 million men, carry a Y chromosome that traces back to one Mongol man from the 13th century. Most likely, Chinggis himself. And yet, for all his power, no one knows exactly where he's buried. Historians believe it's somewhere in the Khenti Mountains, but the exact location remains one of the greatest unsolved archaeological mysteries on Earth. There's even a legend that the soldiers who buried him were killed to keep it secret. And then those soldiers were killed too. No witnesses, no tomb, just whispers. And speaking of secrets, Mongolia is full of them. Take this. In the 1970s, while drilling in the Gobi region, geologists discovered a deposit of rare earth elements, the kind used today in smartphones, electric cars, and advanced weaponry. The deposit was so rich that today, Mongolia is considered one of the most resource-rich nations in Asia, a sleeping giant in the world of modern tech. But the power of this land doesn't come just from below. It comes from what lives above. Because while most countries have national animals, Mongolia has a national bird of prey, the golden eagle. And here's the twist. Some Mongolian communities don't just admire eagles, they hunt with them. For over 1,000 years, Kazakh nomads in Western Mongolia have trained these majestic raptors to hunt foxes and hares in the snow-covered mountains. It's not just a skill. It's a sacred bond between human and bird, passed from generation to generation. And the culture runs just as deep in unexpected places. In rural Mongolia, you might stumble across a pole wrapped in blue silk scarves fluttering in the wind. That's an ovu, a sacred cairn where travelers stop to circle 3 times and leave an offering. Why? To honor the spirits of the land, the sky, and the ancestors. Mongolian spirituality blends Buddhism with ancient shamanic traditions, where mountains and rivers aren't just features of the landscape. They're alive. They watch. They remember. Even the language carries weight. Did you know that Mongolian is written in 2 scripts? Most use Cyrillic today, a legacy of Soviet influence. But the traditional script, A vertical flowing script adapted from the Uyghurs is still used in ceremonial contexts and is undergoing a quiet revival. And then there's the weather. Mongolia is one of the coldest countries on Earth, with winter temperatures often dropping to -40. In some places, frost can appear even in summer. Yet somehow, livestock outnumber people 20 to 1. That's over 60 million animals, including yaks, camels, goats, sheep, and horses, living in some of the harshest conditions imaginable. And speaking of horses, Mongolian children learn to ride almost as soon as they can walk. By age 5, some are already competing in Nadam, the country's largest festival, where kids race bareback for miles across open steppe. It's not a show. It's real. And yes, they often ride without saddles. So the next time someone calls Mongolia empty, remember this. This is a country where dinosaurs once roamed, where a boy with no army united the world, where silence isn't absence, it's presence. And now, we're about to explore the places that prove it. Because if you thought these facts were wild, wait until you see what Mongolia actually looks like. Now, let's begin our journey, not in the wild steppe, but in the heart of it all. A place that feels like a contradiction, Ulaanbaatar. Half the country lives here, and at first glance, it feels like any other capital. Traffic, billboards, glass buildings, but look closer, and you'll notice something strange. A Buddhist monastery stands across from a high-rise. An old woman in a deal walks past a Louis Vuitton store, and behind the skyline, you'll see gurs, traditional nomadic tents, quietly standing in the hills. This isn't a city trying to hide its past. It's a place where the 13th century and the 21st walk side by side. You might hear monks chanting in the morning and techno in the evening, eat mutton stew for lunch, and Korean BBQ for dinner. It's raw, chaotic, evolving, and entirely Mongolian. But the further you move from the city center, the faster the buildings disappear, until suddenly there are no buildings at all, just silence. And stone, because next, we're heading deep into the rocky heart of the steppe, where legends echo through canyons, and the landscape tells its own story. The road vanishes. There's no traffic here, no fences, just wind brushing over rock and the occasional eagle circling overhead. Baga, Gazriin, Chuluu feels like it shouldn't be real. Massive granite formations rise out of the flat steppe like forgotten ruins. Some look like castles, others like sleeping beasts carved by time. But locals don't just see shapes, they see spirits. For centuries, this place has been sacred. Hidden among the rocks are the ruins of a 17th century monastery, old meditation caves, and springs said to have healing power. There's even a stone with a hole, and legend says if you crawl through it, you'll leave your bad luck behind. Climb to the top, and the silence becomes heavy. The air feels different, charged. You're not just standing on rock, you're standing on memory. There are no crowds, no signs, just wind and stories told in whispers. The rocks fade behind you, the road continues, and then the cliffs begin. Tsagaan Suvarga doesn't appear on postcards. Most people don't even know it exists. And yet, it's one of the most surreal landscapes in all of Mongolia. Locals call it the White Stupa, but don't expect a temple. What you'll find instead is a towering cliff face, nearly 30 meters, 98 feet high, and stretching over 400 meters, 1,300 feet wide. Layer upon layer of sediment has been carved by wind and time into strange cathedral-like shapes. At sunrise, the rocks shine pale gold. By sunset, they burn orange and red. And in between, they shift through shades of pink, lavender, and ash, like the desert is painting itself anew every hour. From a distance, the cliffs resemble ancient ruins or crumbling towers. But walk among them, and you'll feel small, like you've stepped into the ruins of a forgotten civilization. Fossils have been found here, silent witnesses to a time when this desert was a shallow sea. Even the wind sounds different among the stone. And just beyond the horizon lies the edge of something vast. Because now, the Gobi begins. And what's waiting inside it defies every expectation. The Gobi doesn't begin with fanfare. There are no towering dunes at first, no blazing heat, just silence, gravel, sky. But then, slowly, the desert reveals itself. You start to see mirages. The grass fades to dust, and shadows stretch longer than they should. The Gobi is massive, over 1.3 million square kilometers, 500,000 square miles, making it the fifth largest desert in the world. But unlike the Sahara, it's cold. In winter, temperatures drop to -40, and yet, life here continues. Nomads still herd camels across the plains. Snow leopards stalk the mountains at night. And dinosaur bones lie just beneath the sand, untouched for millions of years. It's not an empty place. It's a place that hides everything in plain sight. You can drive for hours without seeing another soul, and then stumble on a family living in a single jur, sharing tea, laughter, and the rhythm of the land. But the Gobi has one more secret, a voice. Because hidden within its shifting dunes is a sound so strange, you might not believe it's real. The locals call them Dut Mankan, the singing sands. Here in southern Mongolia, Khongoryn Els rise like golden waves, some towering nearly 300 meters, 984 feet above the desert floor. They stretch for over 100 kilometers, 62 miles, curving along a narrow green strip of life, a small river fed by underground springs. At first, the dunes seem still, but climb them, and everything changes. The sand sinks beneath your feet, the sun scorches, and then it begins. A deep, vibrating hum, like a plane passing overhead or a throat singing beneath the earth. It's not imagination. It's the dunes themselves, singing as millions of grains cascade down the slopes. Scientists say it's friction. Locals say it's the breath of ancient spirits. At the base of the dunes, herders water their camels, children run barefoot, and life feels strangely soft in this brutal place. From the ridge, you see nothing but horizon. The sky touches the sand in every direction. And just beyond the dunes, a new kind of color rises from the land, a place that glows red at dusk and holds the oldest stories in stone. It looks like Mars. Burnt orange cliffs rise suddenly from the flatness, their jagged edges catching the last light of day. They blaze at sunset, hence the name, the Flaming Cliffs. But what lies beneath the surface is even more unbelievable. In 1922, a team of explorers led by Roy Chapman Andrews, the real-life inspiration for Indiana Jones, discovered something the world had never seen before. Intact dinosaur eggs, fossils, skeletons, entire nests. It changed everything we thought we knew about prehistoric life. Since then, paleontologists have uncovered remains of velociraptors, protoceratops, oviraptors, and even creatures that had never been named before. And yet, you can still walk here alone. There's no ticket booth, no museum, just wind, sand, and time. If you're lucky, you might spot a fossil eroding from the cliffside. But don't take it. The law forbids it. And besides, some say it's cursed. The rocks here remember a different world, and standing among them, you start to understand something. This desert wasn't always a desert, and some of its oldest stories aren't finished yet. But now, we leave bones behind and follow a different kind of ruin, one built by faith, not time. You don't find Ongiin Khiid. It finds you. After hours of empty land, a few scattered cliffs rise from the dust, and in their shadows, you begin to notice something. Crumbling walls, stone platforms, the scattered bones of a forgotten monastery. Ongiin Khiid was once one of the largest monasteries in Mongolia, home to over 1,000 monks. But in the 1930s, everything changed. Communist purges swept across the country, and this sacred site was reduced to rubble almost overnight. Only a few monks survived. Most were exiled or killed. Today, the ruins are quiet. A small temple has been rebuilt, and a few monks have returned, but the silence still carries weight. You can walk through the remnants of dozens of buildings, classrooms, meditation halls, temples, all destroyed, yet still standing in some ghostly form. And if you stay until sunset, the red rocks glow. The wind whistles through broken windows, and you begin to feel it, a kind of presence, like the past isn't gone, just buried beneath sand and memory. But farther north lies something even older. Not a ruin, but a monument still alive. It's hard to believe it's still standing. Erdene Zuu is Mongolia's oldest surviving Buddhist monastery, built in the 1500s on the site of the former Mongol capital, Karakorum. And when you first see it, it takes your breath away. Tall white walls stretch out across the plain, marked by 108 stupas, perfectly spaced, glowing in the sunlight. Inside, a patchwork of temples, prayer wheels, and wooden carvings, some worn by centuries of wind and devotion. During the Soviet era, Erdene Zuu was partially destroyed. But unlike Ongiin Khiid, it wasn't lost. It was transformed into a museum. And then, slowly, it came back to life. Today, monks chant again in the courtyards. Visitors light incense, and every corner holds layers of history. Mongol, Chinese, Tibetan, Soviet. This isn't just a sacred site. It's a symbol of resilience. Walk clockwise around the stupas. Spin a prayer wheel. And listen, you might hear the wind. Or maybe something else. Because just beyond these holy walls, the land begins to shift again. The trees thin, the grass gives way to sand, and out of nowhere, the desert returns. It's the kind of place that shouldn't exist. Elsen Tasarkhai is a narrow strip of desert, a sudden burst of golden sand dunes surrounded by green fields and distant mountains. It's often called the mini Gobi, but it's not small. The dunes stretch for over 80 kilometers, 50 miles, forming a surreal ribbon of sand through central Mongolia. And the contrast? It's breathtaking. On one side, you'll see yaks grazing near rivers. On the other, camels resting in the dunes. This is where ecosystems collide, where forest meets steppe, and steppe meets sand. Locals still live in traditional jurs here, offering warm hospitality to travelers and cold bowls of arag, fermented mare's milk. But this is just a pause, a strange, beautiful in-between. Because the land ahead is older, wilder, and carved not by wind, but by time and water. We're heading toward a valley that has shaped Mongolian culture for over 1,000 years. The road here isn't marked, but the path is ancient. The Orkhon Valley isn't just a landscape, it's the cradle of Mongolian civilization. This is where empires rose, where shamans walked, and where the pulse of history still hums beneath the grass. At first glance, it's simple. Rolling green hills, herds of horses, a river cutting through the land. But look closer, and you'll see the outlines of something much older. Stone inscriptions in an ancient Turkic script, burial mounds, ruins of royal camps that once hosted khans and envoys from half the world. The valley stretches for more than 120 kilometers, 75 miles, and it's not just wide, it's alive. In summer, the air is filled with birdsong and the clatter of hooves. In winter, it freezes into silence. And in between, it tells stories, in whispers carried by wind and water. Some say this is where Genghis Khan first rose to power. Others believe the valley holds spiritual energy unlike anywhere else. But whatever you believe, the feeling is undeniable. And just when you think you've touched something ancient, the land shifts again. Because next, we're heading north, far north, to a lake so deep, it's said to have no bottom. They call it the Blue Pearl of Mongolia. Khovsgol Lake is more than just beautiful, it's sacred. This vast body of crystal clear water holds nearly 70% of Mongolia's fresh water. That's over 380 cubic kilometers, 91 cubic miles, enough to supply entire nations. But it's not just the size that stuns, it's the clarity. You can see more than 20 meters, 66 feet straight down. Surrounded by pine-covered mountains and wildflower meadows, the lake feels untouched, ancient, and in many ways, it is. Local shamans believe Khovsgol is alive, with its own spirit, its own moods. Ceremonies are still held here, honoring the water and sky. In winter, the surface freezes solid, thick enough to drive across. In summer, it reflects the clouds like a mirror, and year-round, it draws nomads, herders, and travelers alike. You might see reindeer herders passing through, or a lone boat drifting silently at sunrise. It's peaceful, timeless, but it's also just the edge. Because beyond the lake, the land gets wilder, the roads fade, and the horizon begins to rise into something vast, sharp, and remote. We're heading west, toward the final frontier of Mongolia. This is no longer the Mongolia you thought you knew. We're in the far west now, a province bordered by Russia, China, and Kazakhstan. Here, everything shifts. The language, the faces, the food, even the script. Bayan-Ölgii is home to Mongolia's Kazakh minority, and their traditions go back centuries. Most famous of all, eagle hunting. Yes, real golden eagles, trained from birth to hunt with their human partners. It's not a performance, it's a way of life. In autumn, you can witness the Golden Eagle Festival, a gathering of hunters in traditional dress, riding horses across the plains, eagles perched on their arms like royalty. And beyond the spectacle, there's the land. Rugged mountains, fast rivers, glacial valleys untouched by time. You're thousands of kilometers from Ulaanbaatar, and you feel it. The sky stretches wider, the silence is deeper, and just beyond the last village, the earth begins to rise. Because there's one place left, the most remote, the most otherworldly, and maybe the most unforgettable. It doesn't feel like Mongolia anymore. It feels like another planet. Here in the Altai Tavan Bogd, 5 sacred peaks pierce the sky. The highest reaching 4,374 meters, 14,350 feet. Below them, a glacier more than 19 kilometers, 12 miles long, spilling between the ridges like frozen time. You can't drive here. You ride. By horse, by foot, across rivers, past ancient stone carvings, through land that feels untouched by humans. The weather changes by the hour. Snow in July, sun in October. And when clouds roll in, they swallow the peaks whole. But then there's the silence. A silence so complete, you can hear the wind brush over ice. A silence that holds the weight of centuries. Petroglyphs here date back over 10,000 years. They tell stories of hunters, shamans, spirits, and stars. And when you finally reach the edge of the glacier, cold wind in your face, nothing but white and stone ahead, you realize something. You've reached the end, not just of this journey, but of the road itself. We've just crossed more than 2,400 kilometers, 1,500 miles through Mongolia, from modern cities to ancient ruins, from scorching deserts to frozen peaks. Along the way, we saw a country that's often overlooked, but impossible to forget. A land where traditions are still part of everyday life, where nomads live without addresses, where you can find dinosaur fossils one day and stand beside a glacier the next. This wasn't a highlights reel. It was a journey through one of the world's most remote and unique places. And while it may not have the crowds or fame of other destinations, Mongolia offers something different. Raw nature, living history, and space to breathe. Most people never make it here, but now you've seen why they should. Thank you for watching. And if this journey surprised you, just wait until the next one.